Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. Today's episode is No Game, No Life, Episode 4, Grandmaster. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happens within the episode. So the episode once again picks up directly after the previous episode ended, and this of course is right after the queen that Sora won over manages to win back some of the pieces from Kurami's brainwashing. And basically this makes Kurami incredibly angry, so she starts to order her side to fight against the traitor. And when she does so, Sora steps in and basically tells the queen, "I'm so happy that you've seen the light and fought against the brainwashing and the terrible king. However, I'm not going to ask you to kill your brethren and your former people. You know, we understand that you still love them. We just want peace." And this causes the queen to turn. So she was black to start with, she turned white, and now she turns red, basically creating a third force who then starts to fight still with the white pieces who join her as allies rather than her being on their side directly. This, of course, makes Kurami even more angry, and she basically increases the brainwashing on her side to make them and force them to fight against their former queen and the white side. And this is when her king spontaneously shatters, and Sora says that throughout history, dictators and people who have ruled by force and fear usually will end up being assassinated by a non-combatant, and that is the explanation for why the peace just spontaneously broke. Obviously, once the king is destroyed, that ends the game of chess, and so Kuhaku, which is Sora and Shiro together, are claimed to be the winner, and this leads them, of course, to where they inform Stephanie about what happened, and Stephanie starts flashing back to um, the past, where it just shows like scenes and the previous king voiceovers his words of wisdom, how the person or the people who can save humanity are the people who can win without fighting and have the wisdom to do so, that can understand that they are weak and yet still have the wisdom to be strong, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, what Sora and Shiro just demonstrated in the game. Kurumi, of course, comes over and is upset, and Sora essentially scolds her for trying to throw humanity under the bus, and she then starts bawling about how she was serious and how she worked so hard to get the elves to help her, and how she really thought she was doing what was best. And then Sora, of course, is scolded by Shiro and Stephanie for making a girl cry. And then they go to be crowned. And initially, the old official is going to crown just Sora, but then he objects and is like, "We're Kuhaka, we're together, we're one person, one player." But then the official says that only one person is able to be the representative of the race. So for 3 days, him and Shiro basically play games back and forth to determine the winner, but obviously they're evenly matched, so it keeps staying pretty even until everybody realizes that no, while the commandments do claim that each race has to have a representative who can coordinate games between groups, it does not specify that only one person can be that representative. And therefore, after all of that trouble for 3 days, they then are able to be crowned together as king and queen, and they go forth to greet their new citizens, their people, and Sora gives a speech with Shiro's silent support about the weakness of humanity and how at a time when the continent was war torn, it was humanity who had the largest land holdings. They had ruled the continent, and they did that because they were weak, and their weakness and cowardice allowed them to basically be tricky and wise. But with the commandments, it basically forced those who were stronger to adopt humanity's weapons and wisdom, and that has put them now at a disadvantage. But don't worry, all those strong races are only mimicking humanity's weapons, and they are the masters of it. Therefore, him and Shiro promise to bring back humanity's glory days and declare war on the rest of the world. After they do that, they then are just kind of sitting in their new royal chambers, playing some games when the world kind of goes dark, and Tet reveals himself and he congratulates them on becoming the rulers of humanity. And they talk back and forth, and it is essentially revealed that if you each of the races is given a chess piece, and in chess there's 16 pieces for each side of the board, 16 sentient races. Therefore, if you conquer all of the races and get every race's race piece, you will then be able to challenge God, Tet, for the opportunity to become God yourself. And Shiro and Sora, as Kuhaku, have a policy to be the best at whatever game that they choose to play, and therefore they promise Tet that they are going to conquer the world and then challenge him to another chess game, and he promises this time he won't lose, but they say that Kuhaku never loses, and it is revealed that the only reason Tet pulled them into the world of like games his world was because they beat him and he was a bit buttsore about it. So that is how that ends. And then of course there's a little bit of once Tet leaves, he leaves them on top of the roof, and Stephanie of course is absolutely flabbergasted that the one true God was talking to them, and we end the episode there. Which means that now that we have been reminded about what happens in the episode, it's time to rank the episode. And as always, we rank on our two ranking lists. The first is the mostly objective ranking list, which is without emotion, but bias and judgment can still apply. And then the personal ranking list, which is all emotion and opinion. So we'll start with our mostly objective rank values, and I'm happy to report that on this episode, we did not have any negatives that I felt applied to the episode. So we'll start with our first positive, which is our supporting character development. And this, of course, has to do with Stephanie and her flashbacks to her grandfather and the things that he had said about who the ideal ruler of humanity would be, and her making the connection to Sora and Shiro through that. We then have the resolved subplot, which is the completion of the game of chess, which is worth 2 points. And then we also have our main character development, which is, of course, that Sora and Shiro become king together after the brief 3-day detour into playing games to determine only one of them to be king, which neither of them got the upper hand in. But good news, didn't have to do that. And they could both be king because the rules never actually prevented that. Oh, in my summary, it looks like I forgot something. I just remembered. Sora also, before the coronation like speech that he gives, he does meet with like kind of the internal affairs like ministers, which Stephanie warns him are colluding with other powers. And so to subvert any spies, he basically gathers them all together, says that they're going to play rock, paper, scissors. He's going to play scissors. they're going to play paper, and when they lose, they are not allowed to give false reports or work with other nations. Essentially, they can't be spies, and they swear on the commandments. They do so. The internal ministers give their reports, and based on his game knowledge with simulation games and civilization building games, he manages to basically give orders to how to most effectively utilize their current powers, and decides to wait a couple turns, as he puts it, before giving any further orders, because by then hopefully they'll have grown a bit. And then, of course, there's the opening address, the opening speech that he gives to all of the people. So all of that together is worth the 4 points. And then we have another 4 points for the world building, which of course is the revelation from Tet that a person who conquers all 16 races and gets each of their race pieces earns the right to challenge Tet to become the one true God. And they have agreed now to challenge him again. But that overall gives us 12 as our score. The maximum score that we allow on the channel is a 10, so that makes it a 10 out of 10 episode. Which brings us to our mostly objective series ranking so far, and as always on the channel, when more than one episode has the same score on our mostly objective ranking, it is just placed onto the list in the order that it aired in. And in this case, then, we have in first place beginner, grandmaster becomes second place, which is this episode, and then challenger, and in fourth we have expert. Bringing us to the personal ranking so far. And I really liked this episode. I really liked how the chess game ended and the way that it kind of mimicked real history, and how it was blindsiding to Kurami because they haven't had war in that world for so long, and yet with humans, like because they came from the real world, they're up to date on the way that war works and the way that different rulers are treated, and so they're able to come up with this strategy that ends up beating the magic of the elves based on the knowledge that they have from the modern world in the real world, which I really enjoyed. Obviously, it was also kind of funny to see the turnaround in Kurami going from her stoic, veiled, trying to be cold ruler to bawling baby on the floor because, she was serious and she lost. There then also was a bit of comedy with the detour into the games. Sora's speech was a bit long-winded, and I felt like it did kind of cycle back on itself a few times, but I'm prone to do that when I'm speaking without a plan also, so can't really fault that too much. Like, the speech took up most of the second half of the episode, and that is why I say it was like really long-winded. And then, of course, there was at the very end the seeing Ted again. And I do wonder, though, why they changed the colors of everything, because if Ted was trying to speak with them privately, he failed because Stephanie was still fine and saw the whole conversation from her office where she was working on the internal affairs, which Sora had left to her to do. But either way, overall, very strong episode. I enjoyed it immensely. As I mentioned with the objective, there wasn't really anything overly negative that I could say about it, and that is why I decided to give it a 9 out of 10, and it's a 9 and not a 10 simply because I did feel the speech was a bit long-winded, and the crying of Kurami was very, very, very slightly annoying. But with that, we have our series ranking so far for the personal ranking, and this episode does come in first, Grandmaster, followed by Beginner, Expert, and then Challenger in fourth, With that, we've now rewatched and ranked No Game No Life episode 4 Grandmaster. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.